This week, Kumar and Dana discuss The Ballad of Halo Jones by Alan Moore and the late Ian Gibson. It's a classic 2000 AD series repackaged last year in a color omnibus edition. Halo Jones was never completed, but it is rich, immersive, and fully developed from the characters to the world building, largely due to the influence of Gibson on the creative process. But is there something familiar about it all? We hope you'll spread the word about Deconstructing Comics. Tell your friends about us, share episodes on social media, and also send us suggestions for topics we could cover. Email us at mail@deconstructingcomics.com.
This is Kumar.
This is Dana.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Kumar in Melbourne. Dana's in Fredericton, if anybody knows where that is. Today we're going to talk about The Ballad of Halo Jones, which I wanted to talk about on the show for a very long time, and just somehow didn't get around to. We'd kind of covered too much Alan Moore stuff at one stage, and there was actually a moratorium on covering Alan Moore as a topic, so I kind of dropped it off the list for a while. But Ian Gibson, the artist, passed away like 2 weeks ago now. I think this is really, I would say, his big claim to fame. He was an artist on 2000 AD where this was serialized, and he drew a bunch of Judge Dredd stuff in there before he got tagged to do Halo Jones. And I'm not really sure what he did afterwards. I think he did like some work for U.S. publishers. He's a bit prickly. If you read some interviews with him, I don't know if prickly is a fair word. I think he was, much like Alan Moore, was not treated fairly by the publishers, or he basically thought they were idiots, especially the money men. He really struggled with the money men, who he thought were complete idiots and were dumbing down the work. And I think he was a pretty serious artist and a pretty serious science fiction writer of a sort in terms of the art. I guess if you can look at the artist as a writer, he was very serious about that kind of stuff. And but we'll get through some of that when we talk about Halo. So this was originally serialized, I believe, around 1984 through 1986 or so. So this is around the same time that Alan Moore had just been tagged to do Swamp Thing in the U.S. So he'd been working on a lot of shorts for 2000 AD and other publishers in the UK. And at the same time Swamp Thing started up, I guess Ballad of Halo Jones was starting up. And 2008.
Okay, that's actually, I'm glad that you put it in that context, because I knew the dates for Halo Jones, but I didn't really have it in the Alan Moore. What was the context for Halo Jones? Yeah. Because it certainly doesn't read like, this is like the early days of this creator. No, this is a fully developed
I'm
Alan
a bit
Moore.
shocked by how developed. Well, I wouldn't say even 84 Alan Moore, I would not say is fully developed. This was a hotshot young writer that had written some like the Marvel Man stuff, and people were like, holy cow. And V for Vendetta had started up. It was being serialized, and like, who's this guy? This young dude who's like 23, 24 years old or something like that. And but I'm not sure. Well, I think he came out maybe fully formed or something. I think there's some rough around the edges stuff in his early works for sure, but reading this, I felt like, wow, and I've read it several times, and I really feel like it does feel like a mature work. It feels like there's so much thought that went into it from page one, like with connections with plots and stuff. But I've actually come to feel that often with Alan Moore, it's like he remembers stuff he wrote earlier and then makes new connections, and that he doesn't plan stuff out from page one. But he creates that illusion, which helps him look like even more of a genius. But certainly, so at the time, 2000 AD was really anti-heroes with lasers. It was like Judge Dredd and Rogue Trooper and all these kind of tough dudes. And they were not bad. I mean, Judge Dredd is genius. Like, he was the villain of his book. So Alan Moore's approach was to try to do something completely different from all the other stories. And I actually think the based on interviews with Ian Gibson, it was him that came up with the ideas. He wanted to do a strip about a female character instead of a male character.
It was Gibson's idea.
Gibson's idea, yeah. Had you... See, I get the impression you hadn't read this before. Was that right? Or Okay.
Never read it before. Yeah, I don't even remember hearing about it, although I'm sure it must have come up at some point. But yeah. So it was kind of it was a book when you approached me about doing this episode, it was like, oh, what's that? Googled it.
Yeah.
And it came up. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, right. And yeah, really, I like so many of the things that we seem to talk about. I mean, we talked about the EC comics there, and now this, and a lot of other things. It seems even this old stuff. It's stuff that you maybe had encountered much earlier in your reading life than I have, and that I'm approaching it for the first time,
right.
Which I think it gives the conversation a interesting balance of perspectives.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know how different it would have seemed to you to have this female character in this book, or if it just seemed like whatever. But I guess at the time it would have been kind of a shock. I think it took a little while for the readers of 2000 AD to be on board with it, especially after book 1. It's divided into 3 books. They had planned to do 9 volumes, and it's about this 18-year-old girl named Halo Jones. She's living in the far future in the year like 49, I think. And
something like that.
She's just kind of an ordinary girl. She's not like the key thing is she's 18 years old. She doesn't have any special abilities. She's not whip smart or anything like that. She's not super strong. There's nothing particularly noteworthy about her. She's just living her life. But the main thing is she wants to get out of this squalor that they live in, which is called the Hoop, which is this ring society. They live in this kind of giant ring, which is a power generator for Manhattan, apparently.
Right.
Is what it seems like. So her big thing is, and they're all really crammed in there. The people who live there are totally crammed in, and she wants to escape the Hoop. This is her big dream. So there was planned apparently 9 volumes, and it was going to end volume 9 was going to be her as an old woman. Like it was just going to go through her entire life.
Yeah.
They got through volume 3, and then Alan Moore had some conflicts with IPC, the publishers of 2000 AD. I'm not sure what the nature of that was. I think they probably weren't giving them the rights, or were underpaying them, or were not paying them what they were told they would pay, or something to that extent, and he quit. And Ian Gibson, I believe, was trying to... I think he asked Alan Moore if he could continue the book without him. Yeah. And he did do an outline for, like, volume 4. Which I think if you can dig around, you can find out. I'm not sure if it's any good or bad or what. But all we've got is these 3 volumes. So it's one of these works in Alan Moore's career that's unfinished, a bit like Big Numbers, and there's probably 1 or 2 others that I'm not forgetting, which seemed like they were going to be absolutely epic, and then stopped, and they're never going to come back. Well, I think what we got is pretty epic. Spoiler.
It's still,
the 3 volumes we've got are pretty amazing. They're gems of stories that we have. I would have loved to see the old woman version, like the 80-year-old Halo Jones in volume 9.
I mean, there's so much in here in terms of there's that narrative framing. I don't think it really comes in until book 2, where it's like this lecture from 2 millennia.
Yeah, it's like the year 6000 or something. Yeah.
Oh, some like crazy super future, beyond this already far future that we're into, and they're talking about this historical figure of Halo Jones. So just that use of that framing device in book 2 is teasing how many more journeys there must be, how many stories there must be. If this is someone that they're still talking about hundreds of years later,
that's true, because there's nothing in volumes 1 to 3 that would note her as somebody that would be talking about. You're right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of like the most elegant and beautiful dangling of carrots. It's not cheap cliffhangers. It's like there's wealth and depth and juicy things to uncover. And yeah, so definitely the 3 books we have stand alone, and you can read them, and they're satisfying. But yeah, it's tantalizing what more could be out there.
Yeah. Especially it seems like she's trying to be anonymous at the end of volume 3. But anyway, we'll get to all of that.
Sure, yeah.
So what we've got here, I've got the full color omnibus edition. This one is dated 2023. So the book was originally black and white, and I'm usually kind of a black and white purist. If anything originally came out in black and white, I don't like the colorized versions. I will say that I think this one is pretty great. And I actually, when I saw the pages, I was initially very hesitant about buying it. I was like, do I really need a 3rd copy of Halo Jones in my house? Because I've got like the black and white, and I've got like the 3 volumes separate and the all-in-one. But then I saw the color, I was like, whoa, this looks pretty good. And then I bought it, and I actually love the colors in it, because I think the thing is, Ian Gibson's art is really crammed with detail, and the line weight is sometimes pretty similar between foreground and background objects, so you're really having to do a lot of work to kind of separate objects from each other. You have to stare at a panel for a long time, and I actually think the color really helps to separate everything and make it an easier read. That said, I did read an interview where he said, I hate the colors on the new edition. This was a 2010 interview, so I don't know if that was these colors or there was an earlier color edition. I'm not sure. But he also complained about, like, back in 2000 AD, sometimes you get, like, 2 pages of color in a issue.
Oh, okay.
And he was really angry about that. But then he complained about the computer coloring in this one, which is newly colored by Barbara Nocenzo. And I thought it was pretty great, but I don't know what his issue was with it. But anyway, So, and where was I going with that? Okay, so Volume 1, which was the one where readers were not quite on board, was basically Halo Jones. Is, as I said, a girl living in the hoop. She lives with 2 other people, her friends Rodice and Brinna, who's like this older lady that's almost like the dorm mother almost, although they're not living in a dorm. And then there's a musician girl named Ludi. Yeah. And the whole first book, and each book is about, 10 chapters of 6 to 8 pages each, is them going on a shopping trip in which they have to explore the hoop. They basically have to go on through this gauntlet to go buy what they want to buy.
In terms of this encapsulation of book 1, this is the origin story. As you said, it sets up the hoop and the world. But this is not the world that Halo Jones is going to stay in.
No.
But as I say, this is her origin story, and as you mentioned, that it really is. It's a shopping excursion, and it's pretty cool how you definitely have this space opera story where everything is like that. Our protagonists are running from danger, or they're threatened by riots and all this stuff. But what are they doing? Well, they're trying to catch their bus or their subway, or whatever. Like they're trying to not miss their connection. If they do, they're going to have to sleep in the station. And it's that it's got that heightened level of drama and danger of space opera, but it's in this what we would consider to be kind of a mundane thing, a shopping trip.
Yes, and
I think it clearly is not that in this world.
Yeah, no, and I think the readers of 2000 AD were not quite on board with the 10-chapter shopping trip.
I could see that.
Yeah.
I could see that being a problem for like a 1980s probably male readership.
But I think a lot of this came from Ian Gibson. So my understanding is that Alan Moore started the book, Halo was on some meteor or something, or by chapter 4 she was off in space. And Ian was like, well, why is she in space? And Alan Moore's like, well, she wants to get away from this place. So Ian Gibson was like, well, we have to show the place and why she wants to get out of there. So that's why that got extended to the whole book. And also, Alan Moore was like, well, they're going to live on this hoop, and the hoop is powered by Manhattan. And Ian Gibson's like, that doesn't make any sense. They're out on the waves. The waves are what's generating the power that's going back to Manhattan. So a lot of that kind of science fictional stuff was worked out by Ian Gibson. And then Alan Moore, of course, really built the characters around it. This volume is interesting. It has some pages of the scripts. And I always love seeing these Alan Moore scripts, but these ones are especially like early typewriter scripts, and they are chaos, absolute chaos. They're unreadable. His typewriter was messed up, like the letters are all like out of sync and stuff, and they're running together. You can barely read. He's got handwritten notes. The editor's got handwritten notes all over there. But it's interesting how much of it Ian Gibson, who is a very serious artist, like he did an art degree, was really throwing out a lot of stuff and had to rework a lot of stuff and redesign the pages into a way that would flow.
Wow. And if you're not familiar with Ian Gibson's work or Halo Jones, this is one of those books where you're looking at the amount of detail and lines on the page and you're like, how did this even come out on anything resembling a schedule? It reminded me of Dave Gibbons, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like that, where he's drawing every little person in the crowd 2 miles away.
Yes, and there's not. Usually, you'll find Alan Moore starts with an artist, and then 2 or 3 issues into a series, he's like, "Oh, I know what this guy's good at," and then starts writing to those strengths. But with this, I guess because Ian Gibson was a stalwart at 2000 AD already. Right out of the gate, like page 1 is this giant 2-page spread of the hoop, and then you get to zoom in onto this little bubble, like this hub, and then we see Halo's in there, like that's her room where she's living with these 2 other ladies. And there's all these like millions of vehicles. It's like your Blade Runner Fifth Element kind of sky filled with cars and stuff, and all this stuff's going on. Meanwhile, you've got all this text, which is like a radio report or a TV news report going on. So there's so much going on. Alan Moore definitely did not like hold back. He didn't build up to that level of detail. It was like there from the beginning. But right, it's really and Ian Gibson also was the one that dictated. I don't want any sound effects or captions, explanatory narrative captions.
Interesting. Okay.
Because he was still using those. Alan Moore was still using those in Swamp Thing. But Dave Gibbons was the guy. I think they said, well, let's not have any sound effects or captions in Watchmen. That's why you have the diary entries and stuff like that. You don't have actual. And then Rorschach walked into the room or that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So, it's really full-on right at the beginning. But Ian Gibson said he wanted people to just be thrown into the world and have to figure out, like, we have to figure out life, was the basic approach. So, the other thing is we get the Clockwork Orange kind of dialect, which is another Alan Moore thing, which he's been doing since day one, is making up languages. Almost every series has some character that's speaking in some dialect, just in some accent or something. That's in there. So you got to figure all that out. Now we get all sorts of details. So there's a ship, like a ocean, like a cruise liner, but it's like a spaceship called the Clara Pandy, which is about to be decommissioned. And for some reason, this is in the news. People don't want it to be decommissioned or whatever. We learned that there's some. The hoop is also populated by a minority alien race called the Proximan, who are these weird beings with no arms that are just hanging around here and there. There's a kind of cult called the Different Drummers. They seem like they seem like a street gang, but they're all like listening to some kind of synchronized drumming sound in their heads. So they're all kind of
they have
each
implants.
Other. Yes, that's right. And we learned that there's some sort of war going on in the Tarantula Nebula.
Yes.
And we get mentions of somebody called General Louise Cannibal. Yeah. Right. Now, again, I'm wondering how far ahead Alan Moore was planning this stuff, because all this stuff kind of comes back. Except for the Proximan, maybe, the armless aliens.
But you can wonder if they going to maybe come back in
that's
book,
right,
book 5 or book 6 or book 4 or 7 or 8.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how many things... how many of those little seeds were strewn out throughout book one that we'll never be able to recognize. I mean, you might be able to pick things out and say, oh, this might come back or this could come back. There's one thing there with the cybernetic dog that is a I guess being essentially a robot, you figure that it's this infallibly loyal companion, and of course there's this whole kind of storyline that twists that up. And you kind of wonder, is that something that again might come back? Because even though the conflict between Jones and this dog, Toby, I guess is its name, right? That sort of resolves, but the reason behind it is like this thing with the owner's will, where that she had, and I mean, yeah, you could say that explanation's done, but again, is that something that comes back later? Who knows what seeds might be there? We'll never know, of course. So I guess should just focus on the book we have.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So then we get through the news reports. We kind of hear about how somebody has actually bought the Claripandy and is going to save it from being decommissioned. And that person's name was Lux Chop. What was it? Something.
I had to write it down. Yes, Lux Roth Chop.
Lux Roth Chop.
Yeah.
This is a mystery figure. We just hear about this over the news. This is very distant from whatever's happening to Halo in her life, where she's just trying to get through this, get through the hoop. So then her friend Ludi, who is a musician, is a very talented musician, but ends up, they're hoping their band will get signed to a record deal or something. She ends up giving up her dream and selling her instrument, pawning it, and getting a different drummer implant, which is like just becoming... It's like deciding to become a drug addict, I guess, or something like that. Yeah. It's equivalent to that.
Join the cult. Yeah.
Yeah, and meanwhile, after they come back from their shopping trip, they come home to find that Brenna, the kind of dorm mother type, has been murdered in seemingly a burglary. And this is all kind of too much for Halo, who's wanted to get out, had fantasies about getting out in the first place, and now she really wants to get out. So her and Rhodese, who was her best friend, they go over to Manhattan to look for a job. There's all sorts of little details here, like about the cards they use that are like their welfare cards that they kind of have and stuff. Anyway, so they have to give up those cards to go look for work. They go over there, and there's a job on the Claripandy, but there's only one. So Rhodese is like, well, I guess we're not going to go. And Hale's like, no, I'm going to go. Or she decides to go off on her own. This is how... Yeah. It actually reminded me a little bit of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. At the very end, when he gets on the ship. Oh, right. And he's got a wife and kids. And that's never mentioned. And I think people are like, there's a mistake in this movie because he forgot it was... I'm like, no. That's the point of the movie, is he knows about the wife and kids. But this is more important to him. And... I think it's more important to Halo. And she's like, well, you come out, you follow a year later, and I'll meet you at this certain bar at this certain planet in 1 year from now.
They make a bet, right? Right. It's like whoever gets there last has to buy the drinks or whatever. Yeah.
Right. And because Brenna died in her will, Toby was part of the will. Toby has been willed to Halo. So Halo gets onto this cruise ship with her, where she's going to be working as a hostess. And then that's kind of where book one ends, as she takes off for the stars. Now, did we want to mention anything else about this one?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, it's the shopping. It's the origin story, the shopping excursion. We see Halo cutting her ties or having those ties cut for her. Yeah. The ultimately the escape to adventure. I think going back to your comment about this idea that Ian Gibson had to have this, like, volume 1, book 1 needs to explain why she's in space. That's such a great idea, and is so perfectly executed here with all these elements coming together. Yeah. So book 2, we're on board the Claripandy. now.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, by the way, just before we get there, I just want to mention you see a lot of alien writing around. That's like a real working language that Ian Gibson made up as part of his art degree. Years earlier.
Yeah, as you do. Yeah.
Yeah, so now she's working as a hostess on this ship, and it's almost like we get 1 year here. So as you mentioned, we start in the year 6427 with a lecture being given, a history lecture by this professor who the students think is droning on, and we learn that there's like Halo's like maybe she was even a man, or there's all this like conflicting historical data about her, but this guy's written a book which he thinks is correct, has all the correct details of her, the correct biography of her life. Now, we leave book 1, and now we get more seeds of stuff that's going to play out into book 3. I was really... And I've read this several times, and there's still stuff that kind of like, oh, I forgot about that. I forgot that thing comes back that was mentioned in book 2. So she's just working as a hostess. She has a roommate whose name was...
Toy.
Toy. She's really big and strong. This is pointed out on page 2 of like this book.
Yeah.
I
think Halo is narrating here or whatever.
Yes, that's right. That was writing a letter to Rhodese.
It's like a letter home.
Yeah, a letter to Rhodese, yeah. And she says, Toy, she's really nice. She's 7 feet tall, and yesterday, when one of the slabs smart-mouthed me, she broke his wrist. She's the toughest woman I've ever met. You'd hate her. And you think, okay, he's just building character. That actually comes into play. All this stuff comes into play later on.
Yeah.
So the ship is navigated by a dolphin. Is this the first time we've seen this in science fiction, or is this familiar from something else?
It rings a bell. Wasn't it Douglas Adams? I mean, the dolphins definitely had a pretty big role in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but...
Oh, that's right.
Because the whole thing was where they were leaving Earth, and so long and thanks for all the fish, right?
Yes.
I don't remember their exact role.
Wasn't there something in Johnny Mnemonic
where dolphins were flying spaceships?
They had dolphins, like, I don't know, but they were like plugged into computers or something.
It sounds like the sort of thing that should have been in Johnny Mnemonic if it wasn't.
I feel like it was one of that or one of those other kind of cheapo 90s sci-fi movies. Yeah, so and she can speak Halo can speak the language. She already learned it. I think this is seeded in volume 1.
Yeah, she did a year of cetacean in high school or whatever.
And I think it mentions that in volume 1.
Yeah,
so anyway.
She could speak cetacean, and it's like a really nerdy thing.
Yes.
Like she's kind of quiet about it because she didn't want to get teased about how smart she is. It's like, I guess the stereotypical girl would be shy about being good at math or whatever. Like, and I mean, gender roles and expectations and things are definitely things that Alan Moore must have been thinking about. No question here with that. But
yeah.
So it was definitely mentioned in volume 1 that she spoke cetacean, and it was kind of a embarrassing thing for her, but serves her well. She's lucky.
I think the thing is those details are worked in a way that don't stand out when you read them the first time. They're very organically placed into the dialogue, or something. Like she has to defend her knowledge of the language for some reason in volume 1 about not getting bullied. For some reason, it comes up that she knows it, but it does not stick out in any way.
No.
And you don't know it's going to come up again until you meet the dolphin navigator and she's speaking to it, and you're like, oh yeah, I remember that little thing that she mentioned, but it's not telegraphed or anything like that.
Yeah.
So what else in this volume? So Toby's memory coils or whatever are running down, so they need to be replaced. There's a mechanic on board who can do it. I think he's the one that has kind of a romantic interest in Halo at this stage, or was it someone else?
You mean the cyberneticist?
Yeah. Or somebody. It's one of the crew.
That was a weird little relationship, because my impression was that Halo was into him.
Yes.
But he was like oblivious. I think he was more interested in that celebrity lady, the wealthy, glamorous voice actor.
Okay.
And, yeah.
The other roommate is this character who, bizarrely, what's his name? I don't know if we ever get what's his name's name, but it's
Glyph.
Glyph, that's right, Glyph.
Yeah.
The chapter is called "I'll Never Forget What's His Name."
Yeah.
Glyph is this odd character that is so nondescript that nobody notices he, she, or is there, and he, she has had her gender swapped so many times that they don't remember what the original gender was, and nobody knows what it is anymore.
Yeah.
And just is in rooms and nobody notices, and can steal things and nobody notices, which is how they got wealthy, or not wealthy, but could afford to get on the Clara Pandy or something like that.
Yeah.
Or survive that way.
And this whole thing too is just like so important as well.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. But it's just kind of weird. And then we get a whole chapter where Glyph tells us their life story, and at the end of it, Toy and Halo had stopped listening at some point and don't even remember. It's a very weird. It's almost, the chapter itself seems like out of place. Like, why do we have this chapter devoted to this character? I guess this is an instance where even then you don't know that Glyph is going to come back in an important way, like to play into the climax of it.
Yeah, but it's very much. I mean, this would have been something that would have been plotted out already. I'm sure.
Yes.
Like this was already planned in everyone's head.
Yeah, and according to some of the afterwards by Alan Moore, this was the chapter that people really latched onto. Like, finally, people started getting into Halo Jones with this weirdo Glyph chapter.
Yeah. I don't know. It's sort of sad that these characters seem to come and go so quickly. I mean, we'll never know how quickly and how permanent this passing is of all these different characters, but I loved Glyph. Like, the concept of that character was just so cool, and the extreme to which it's taken. It's like this person is so forgettable.
Yeah.
And I actually think there's some really sort of, in 2023, some kind of problematic points about this character, like basically the fact that they've switched their gender so much has led to this inadvertent loss of being an interesting person. That could be interpreted as a less than flattering portrayal of transgender transgenderedness, or anyway. I certainly don't think it was meant with malice, but it's hard to say. But anyway, the character I thought was so interesting and fascinating, and if ever there was truly a they, Glyph is it.
Yeah, well, let me read this little bit here. This is Glyph's story. Glyph narrates their own story.
Yes.
I remember I started off as a girl, that much I'm certain of. Or maybe I started out as a boy. Never mind, it doesn't really matter. The thing is, I wasn't happy as a girl, or maybe I wasn't happy as a boy. So I had a total body remold that turned me into a boy or possibly a girl. That would have been fine, except that 6 months after the treatment, I started regretting my decision. So I had another remold to turn me back to whatever I started out as. Over the next 5 years, I changed my mind about whether I wanted to be a boy or girl 47 times. I suppose all those remolds finally did something to my mind and body. Eventually, I wasn't a boy or a girl. I wasn't anything. I couldn't even remember what I'd been originally. The doctors were equally confused. Also, my personality had been completely erased. That's why I'm so boring. Yeah.
I feel like when you read it out loud, it's like, that's worse than I remember it in terms of being politically correct. But in terms of being a fascinating character concept, so I'm conflicted about it. But
I guess maybe is it the gender swaps that caused the personality loss, or I mean that's pretty much the implication there. But I don't know. I don't want to sit here and defend or I don't want to come down on either side, because I don't know what's in the mind of the writer, right? But it certainly doesn't seem, this does not strike me as a malicious portrayal. And I would say that there's a lot of gender swappy kind of stuff in Alan Moore's early works.
Sure.
Especially more than you'd see from any other writer at the time.
Radice is explicitly transgender, because she says that she's a man, doesn't she?
Oh,
that's a seed
that I did not pick up on. Okay.
like it's mentioned once in passing. Like
Right.
it's which is kind of the most beautiful example of being progressive, right? Is when we don't even need this doesn't even need to be a topic of conversation. It's just this person Rodis is, or I should say, presents as a woman, but
interesting
is biologically male. I can't remember how it's brought up, but it's kind of a
See, there's another seed that I missed. Yeah, right there. Okay.
I think it was in the forward that it was highlighted or something.
Okay.
So I didn't notice it. I mean, I did notice it when I read it, but I probably wouldn't have noticed it if it hadn't been highlighted in the introduction to the book or whatever. But yeah.
Right.
More discussion of Halo Jones in a moment. But first, be sure to join us for 20th Century TV and music trivia quiz videos and more on our Patreon page. Patrons donating $4 a month or more get access to hours of additional podcasts. Get all the info at patreon.com/deconcomics. Edward and Alphonse Elric, as a result of attempting the forbidden act of resurrecting their mother with alchemy, have paid the price. Edward lost an arm and a leg. Alphonse lost his whole body, his soul now attached to a suit of armor. Together they search for a way to make their bodies complete again and uncover a deadly plot by their country's military rulers. That's the concept of Hiromu Arakawa's Fullmetal Alchemist, one of the best manga ever made. Tim and Patrick are rereading Arakawa's masterwork in search of interesting sound effects, translation errors, goofy humor, and, a great story. The podcast is The Law of Equivalent Exchange, a chapter-by-chapter look at the manga Fullmetal Alchemist. New episodes every other Monday, wherever podcasts are found. What are you willing to exchange?
Okay, so there's also the president is on board, or the president of something. I don't know if president of Earth or what.
Well, in the presidential suite,
somebody's in the presidential suite that's totally top secret, the presidential cabin, and nobody's allowed to go in there and see what it is. Yeah. But for some reason, one day, Halo is given the job of delivering the meal to the cabin, and she has to leave it outside the door. She's not supposed to go in. You leave it there and leave. That's the protocol. But she goes, and then there's a cry of pain or something inside.
Yep.
So she decides she's going to open the door and see what's in there. She goes in, and she sees it's a rat king. So it's like 5 or 6 rats with their tails tied together. And this creature speaks through a computer, through the text on a computer screen.
Yeah.
And says that it's dying. One of the rats in the king is dying, so it needs to be replaced ASAP. So she goes out. One of her adventures is she goes out, she catches a rat, and with the help of Glyph, who is able to catch a rat because the rat doesn't notice him. Mm-hmm. And she brings the rat back and saves the Rat King by tying its tail in. And
that's kind of it, right?
Yeah, but there's a thing where she has to keep it secret. Like, she's not allowed to say what she's witnessed.
Yeah, I think the Rat King says to her, like, if you tell anybody, I will kill you, basically. Yeah.
And then Halo says, how do I know you won't tell anybody? And the computer screen says, trust we. And yes. And then we get the terrorist attack by the Tarantulan Emancipation Army, which is seeded again in Volume 1, that there's this war going on out in space being led by this general.
Right.
We also learned there's something going on with the water supply, like Earth's export is water, but it's being halted by the dolphins. This slowly kind of takes shape.
Yeah, and a lot of these things are like all the background politics of the setting and stuff. Yeah.
It's just like dialogue. People are having conversations about this stuff, or you hear it over. It's in the background of the news, and you just kind of don't really pay much attention to it, except the Tarantulan Emancipation Army attacks at this stage. Yeah. And then there's something to do with the water. We don't know quite what it is. Has something to do with the dolphins. We don't know quite what it is at this stage. We get there's a big climactic battle, which we won't spoil too much, but Toy's size and strength. Suddenly it's like, oh, this is why she's so tough, because she's going to play an important role. And Glyph being invisible plays an important role in this big battle that happens. And then I think we finally arrive on this ice planet where
Yeah.
Halo was supposed to meet Rhodese.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, this is the one. It's so 1 year has passed.
Yes, so we've had one
and
full
it's time
year
for their date.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's arrives there, and she gets a phone call from Rhodese in the bar where they're supposed to meet. And Halo's like, well, where are you? How far away are you? And she's like, I never left Earth. And Halo's super pissed off about this and basically hangs up on her. And she's like, I'm not coming back to Earth. I'm staying out here. Like, Halo has no plans to go back.
And this is the doubling down of the escape to adventure. This is why, like, it's like in book 1, she left home, and this is where you leave home and everybody's like, oh yeah, he'll be back or she'll be back. Everybody thinks you're coming back, and then you don't come back, and then book 2 is where it's like, I'm not coming back.
Yeah.
And it's really quite a downswing emotionally that book ends on. That chapter is a real downswing, I guess, from well, I guess it comes from a very high point, not that it's happy, but yeah, as you say, that climactic battle and all of that stuff is very high tension, and then boom, she's on the ice planet, and it's like, oh, we're not going to see Rhodese again. There's another character that's gone.
We've had two betrayals again at the end of book 2,
right,
basically.
Yes. Yeah.
So again, she's been kind of cut off from her people, and it's almost like she says, Rhodese says, I thought you just wanted a break. Where will you go? And Halo Jones's answer is out, which is always her answer. I'm just going to go out.
Exactly. What was it? Where
did she go? Where did she go? Out.
What did she do?
But it's almost like, is she doing it out of spite at this stage? Because the line, where will you go, becomes very important in the early chapters of the next volume, because she has nowhere to go. She's made a decision that she cannot support. And it's not like she has a stack of successes to base her future success on. Like, she can't say, oh, things are going well for me, I'm going to keep going out in space.
Yeah.
It's like things have gone horribly, and she's been betrayed again, and she's like, well, I'm not coming home. So it's almost like just out of spite. She's like, I'm gonna keep trying to make it out here just because I don't want to go back there.
Yeah. And then and book 3 then it's 10 years later. So what are we to do as the reader but to assume that her life has been whatever? I'm sure she's had adventures, but at the opening of book 3, it doesn't seem like she's super fulfilled and happy because of that.
No, she's stuck in this one bar that she goes to and drinks this thing called cat's blood.
Cat's blood wine or whatever. Yeah. Charming.
Oh yeah, actually the Proximen are here on this planet too. I just noticed as I'm flipping
are
through
they? Yes. Okay. That's good. But and on that note, I just wanted to say that I really liked, and I noticed this and appreciated it, that there are strange aliens, but it's not like Star Trek where every time you turn around, there's somebody with a different shaped forehead. Like in Halo Jones, there's like 4 types of people.
Yeah.
And I mean, species or whatever, right? Like you've got the humans, you've got the Proximen. There's like little guys with big ears. Maybe they don't show up until book 3, but they're like some other race.
There's what I assume they go to a planet later called Moab, which is a super heavy gravity planet where the people seem really squat and like they have heavy jowls and droopy faces. And I kind of assumed that they were humans because they say it's a colony. I assumed that they were humans that had been altered by the heavy gravity.
Yep.
So I don't even think they're necessarily aliens. I'm trying to think.
No, and that's the thing is that I think I think there's only 2 planets that they go to in book 3 that we actually get to see the. Right. I mean, natives isn't the right word because, as you say, they were colonies. These are humans that seeded these planets, and yeah, maybe they've adapted over generations or however long. But there, I was trying to flip through and see if I could find one on the page. Maybe they were in book 2. But anyway, the point is that there's only a handful of different alien species, which I really like that because despite being a space opera and being all about like spectacle and color and excitement, there's a lot of restraint in this book.
It's actually,
like, in that sense.
One of my favorite things about Dune is that there are no aliens. Every planet is humans that have colonized there 10,000 years earlier or something like that. Yeah.
For sure. And I mean, I like that there's aliens, but I like that there's not too many aliens.
Yes, exactly. So she's really, as you said, down and out. But then chapter 1 ends with her, like, she's been kicked out of the bar. She's unconscious, drunk, in the dirt, in the middle of the road. Then the army comes calling, and the army recruiters show up on this planet, and Toy happens to be one of the recruiters. That's where she's gone off to. So she ends up recruiting Halo, or convincing Halo to join the army. And now we get the army volume. Volume 3 is all about Halo's life in the army, in the Tarantulan War. So this stuff was heavy, and it felt really like what war must be like without going to war. And it reminded me very much of Joe Haldeman's The Forever War, because that was a book that was like, I don't know if you've ever read that, but they go away at near light speed to fight battles in other places. Then they fly back, and by the time they come back, like 20 years has passed on Earth. And or 40 years, and they just can't connect with anybody because they're 40 years out of joint. So it's very much like what it must be like actually coming back from a real war. It's a perfect use of like a science fictional metaphor to point out what the real thing must feel like. And I feel like every chapter of this was like that. But it did make me wonder, have we seen this stuff before? We get every kind of war thing. What's the word I'm looking for? War theme in like 10 chapters. There's an amazing chapter where they go after these snipers, and the chapter starts with Halo saying, like, I saw somebody age faster than I'd ever seen them age today, or something like that.
Yeah, that was a good line to open that chapter with. Yeah,
let me try to find the line. But then they go out to chase down this sniper. Oh, yeah. Okay, here it is.
This is the scene from Full Metal Jacket.
Yes.
This is how I read that, right? With the sniper woman. Yeah.
So today we went out on jungle patrol, and I saw something strange. I saw someone get older after they were dead.
That's what it was.
You're like, what does that mean? And then they go out, and they fight these snipers in the jungle, and they kill one, and it seems to be like a 9-year-old kid or a 10-year-old kid.
I think 11.
11.
Die. Yeah.
And then they're like,
person says, God, she can't be more than 11.
Yeah. And then somebody else is like, no, they just look young. Surely she's like 15. And they're like, no, they wear makeup. She's like 20.
Here's the exchange. I think this is like one of the moments in this crazy, adventuresome, whimsical space opera. What does they say? Toy. She can't have been more than 11 years old. 11? No chance. They're these gorilla women, right?
Yeah.
They look small, or they look young because they're small. She's 18 easy. And then somebody replies that she could be even older. The camouflage with the mud, it hides their wrinkles. And as they walk away, it's like, 25. She could be 25 years old under that gunk. More like 30.
Yeah.
And then we come back to that line where this person aged like 20 years after she died. And it's such a, this is quite, the parallels to war in general are not parallels. So like, the cliches and the themes that are brought in about war are there. But I mean, for me, this was all, like it's Full Metal Jacket. It's Vietnam War.
Yeah. So have we seen this stuff before is my question, because it was almost too good. Like every time I read this book 3, every chapter has a kind of war theme, which really makes you feel like, holy shit. Like there's one where she has to drag her commander's been injured, and she drags her back to base, and by the time she gets back, she's been having conversations with her. Or
that's Toy.
Oh, that was Toy. Okay.
A spoiler alert.
Oh, okay. Yes, you're right. Okay, I forgot. Why was she in the same platoon as Toy when Toy was a recruiter? Anyway, so Yeah, so she drags her back, and she's having conversations with her, and by the time she gets back, then the medics reveal that she's dead. And it's like, that can't be. I've been talking to her, whatever. And I feel like...
Yeah.
Have we seen all this before? Have we seen...
I feel... and this is where it's kind of weird that
is 23, 24-year-old Alan Moore actually coming up with this stuff, or...
I think a lot of this stuff is not new. Yeah, I mean... Surely to goodness, all these tropes were done in like the EC War comics and stuff beforehand.
Yeah, like there's one chapter. So after Toy dies, she's just like she can't take it anymore. She quits the army. But then there's a whole chapter where she tries to live a civilian life and she can't because all her skills are only army skills. She can't even get a job because all she can do is like strip a gun and like rebuild it or whatever. You know what I mean? And I was like, this is amazing. I was really, and then she re-enlists because of this. And the other woman, there's a woman that's been in there a long time called Life Sentence. Her nickname is Life Sentence because she keeps re-enlisting. She's like, now we understand each other. Yeah. And Hale was like, yep. And I was like, wow, this is heavy stuff. But then I was like, have I seen this somewhere? Like, this surely this has been covered.
I read this, and none of this to me comes across as being new ideas or necessarily novel. It's presented in a completely creative and interesting way. But I do feel like it's being like it's. I mean, there's references here. There are influences, but then again, I mean, I kind of get your question because when we look at the computerized coloring, this threw me off. Reading this in December of 2023, you could tell me that this came out in January of 2023, like when the collection was actually re-released, and I would believe you. This does not read like a comic book that came out in 1984.
Yeah.
But I guess I just wasn't reading these comic books in 1984 because I was too busy with Archie and Richie Rich,
absolutely.
I guess. Garfield.
yeah.
You're not allowed to say Garfield on this podcast. Sorry, it's a dirty word. But I mean, so yeah, I guess the point. My point is that maybe some of this stuff was being like maybe some of these things are coming out for the first time. They are new ideas for 1984, but I don't know. I mean, surely to goodness that stuff about war, like those themes of like war almost being time travel, that kind of metaphor of you come back to civilian life and it's like you've traveled 100 years into the past or the future because you can't connect with anybody anymore. Or that image of the soldier dragging her
like a comrade
teammate, comrade teammate out of the battlefield and saving them, but only to find that they've been dragging a dead body for no one knows. They don't know how long, and they've been talking to the ghost. I mean, that to me, that's got to be an EC story right there, right? The twist at the end, he's dead.
Yeah.
The shocks page or whatever. Yeah.
I will say one of the interesting twisty things about it, I guess, or the new aspects is there are almost no male characters in any of the three books.
Certainly none of them have conversations with each other talking about things that are not women.
No, that's right. That's right.
That was me trying to clumsily flip the
Bechdel test. Yeah. No, and in Volume 3, I think the only men we see are... well, except for another one we'll get to, but they've got the slabs are those the men that are like the cloned male soldiers that are like these big muscle heads.
Male soldiers, yeah. But most of the soldiers are women, and that's never explained, I don't think. But it's just
no, and I think that it says in one of the afterwards or interviews somewhere mentions that like 70% of the Hoop is women. So my guess is that either. Maybe all the men the population of males is lower anyway for some reason. Maybe they've been called up to war, this long-running war in the Tarantula Nebula.
Right,
possible. Yeah. But I love stuff like they have things that are like cycle exemptions in one chapter. And I love that they're using Absorbix pads for like bandages at some stage. And all these little details that come up here and there were fun little bits.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and the other male character, leads into the next point, is we finally get to meet General Louise Cannibal in person.
Yeah.
Now, we had Also, we had met Lex Rothchop at the end of Volume 2, which is another character who's like, we're not going to meet this guy. But no, he was there. So Cannibal shows up, and he's actually had, tusks implanted into his jaw to make himself look scarier. He's like this giant hulking dude. He must be like 7 or 8 feet tall.
Yeah, he looks like a big Japanese ogre, Oni or something. Yeah.
Yes. Exactly. And so then they get shipped off to the number 1 war zone, which is this planet called Moab, which is, I guess, a biblical reference, but I didn't know what it referred to exactly. Because there's a whole thing here about Lot's wife turning back and turning into salt and stuff like that. Yeah. So this planet has super mega gravity. The gravity's so huge that it slows down time. And there's a really funny interview with Alan Moore, or he appeared on this science podcast talk with Brian Cox and Brian Greene, and they were talking about like science fiction, and they said, we'll talk about making up fiction with science. He says, well, I made up this planet where the gravity was so huge that time slowed down, and Brian Greene was like, that's real, and Alan Moore was like, that's real?
Nailed it.
You have these suits that are like these heavy armored, clunky, heavy suits that you have to wear to protect yourself from being crushed by the gravity. And there's like a little knob on there that a valve that you have to make sure it's closed, because if it's open, you'll just turn into a puddle. There's some gruesome scenes where they're running from battles, and they're literally running through puddles of their comrades who've their suits have been compromised. And they've turned into puddles, and they're running through these puddles.
What was the sound that they used to describe it? Like the giant, like popping its cheek or something?
Yes.
Anyways, whatever. It's just a kind of a brilliant little turn of phrase that's it's horrifying and effective.
Yeah. So they run out to the battlefield. And they have a fight there, and then they run back. And it's been a 5-minute battle, but 2 weeks have passed.
Yeah, because of the time dilation.
Because of the time dilation, where the gravity inside the dome, the base, where they're protected from the gravity, time is passing relatively normally. So she's like missing birthdays and stuff while she's out there having fights.
Yeah. She goes from being 29 to 30 to 31 to 30. I think she's 32 by the end of the chapter.
Yeah.
She started at 29.
Yeah. One detail here that didn't work was that at one stage everyone's clocks and watches stopped, but they're still walking around. Clocks are not tied into the space-time of the universe. I see this in science fiction all the time, where time stops and the people are walking around, but their watches have stopped.
Especially if it's a digital watch, you could almost get that a hand would be affected, like physically by gravity or something, or like a field that's like exerting force. But like a digital watch, like I've seen it in movies where time stops and the digital clock stops.
Yeah, but if you're walking around, your blood is flowing. Why aren't the gears turning in this watch still?
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't make any sense anyway.
One of those little things.
Yeah.
Poetic life.
Another thing was there's this one character that people think are lucky. Her name is Mona Jukes, and she escapes being killed like a bunch of times, and people think she's good luck, so they touch for good luck. I'm like, I've seen this somewhere.
Yeah.
That's not Halo Jones.
Good luck charm. Yeah. She keeps not dying because she trips and falls down, and the bullet whizzes over her head harmlessly.
Yeah.
That's not a literal description of something that happens, but as just an example of the kind, like she's constantly tripping and having accidents, and therefore not being killed. Yeah. So she becomes this kind of talisman to the various members of the platoon or whatever. Yeah, I mean, there's so much. It's just like that. Man, this reminds me of something.
Yes.
But didn't that come out in 1993? Or
Yeah.
Whatever.
I will say also, I want to add that the time dilation, the funny time stuff, and there's a lot of it, and it's really good and it's very trippy. But Alan Moore and non-linear time is like Quentin Tarantino and Ladies' Feet. Like, it just keeps happening again and again. almost everything. And I was reread 1963 a few months ago. I was like, oh, there's no time travel stuff in this one. There is. There was a whole chapter about it. I was like, oh, I'd forgotten about that. It's like, it's always there in some degree. So then she ends up actually in a relationship with General Louise Cannibal. And he's like, yeah, I'll take you out. It's interesting because at the start of this chapter, she was like completely broke. When she was down and out, she was broke, but she wanted to go further out. She still was like, I want to go further out.
Yeah.
And I think they are at like the edge of the galaxy. So you actually have to get through that space between galaxies to go any further out. And there's like no way she's going to do it. But he comes along. He's got this super new ship. And he's like, yeah, this ship can get us anywhere. It's got this new kind of hyperdrive or whatever. And we can go really far out. And they end up in this relationship together. But at the same time, he's on trial for supposed war crimes. I think that Dolphins of Earth are the ones that are like the judges in this court.
Yeah, they definitely seem to be involved in investigating him.
Yes. And he's like, it's all lies or whatever. And you kind of believe him.
Where have we heard this before? Yeah, sounds familiar too. Anyway.
Yeah. Kind of believed him a little bit because he was in a relationship with Halo, and Halo's our heroine. And I was like, it's kind of a good relationship. Like, he's this weird, scary dude, but she's like, I like you. And it's like, okay, she's going to find some happiness now. It's the end of book 3. She's been through all this war as hell stuff. Surely the guy's not that bad. It's going to work out okay. No. Then we find out it is that bad.
Yeah.
And she realizes that he's guilty of like chemical warfare or the equivalent, like releasing diseases. Rat war is what they call it.
I was going to say it's a very specific crime that he's guilty of here. Yeah. And Halo is in a unique position to know whether he's guilty or not.
Yes, and also that she facilitated it without realizing it.
Yeah. Yes.
And she's like,
she saved the life of the Rat King.
Yeah. Without whom the rat war could not have been conducted, and all those billions of lives would not have been lost, razed to the ground. So she turns the tables on him, and she steals the ship, and she goes up to the stars. And she's 32, I guess, 30 biologically, and that's the end of book 3, and we never got we don't know what happened in the subsequent 6 volumes that led her to being a famous person when she was 80.
Yeah. Yeah, what a wild ride.
Yeah, really. I think that it's interesting because there's a lot of ups and downs in terms of your level of joy versus your level of grief in all 3 books. There's like, it's kind of like fun when they're running around in the hoop shopping.
Yeah.
And then like all that horrible stuff happens with Brenna and with Ludi, and it becomes a real downer. And then book 2, it seems like she's having fun on this kind of cruise ship. Yeah. Living the life, going from star to star, and then that all goes south. And book 3 is really up and down. Like she's completely down and out. Then it seems like she's going to be saved by the army because Toy is the one that recruits her. You're like, well, maybe it's not going to be that bad. But we learned that there's been a massacre on Earth of some sort. Just like that's out of the question. She's never going to go back. And the recruiting ship is called the Glory Barge. So they're kind of like, obviously, we know it can't be a good thing for her to join. But Toy's there, and you feel like she's going to be protected from the horrors of war. And it's not. It's totally horrors of war. No. Then it seems like there's a glimmer of hope when the war is over and she starts this relationship, and you're like, okay, maybe things are going to be on the up now. And then that, turns sour. And it's, talk about a wild ride. Yeah, it's so up and down over and over.
So it is all internally so consistent because Halo is really an unremarkable person in terms of essentially, right? At her core, at her foundation, she's just a woman, just a human woman. And I think she's somebody that we can definitely look at and admire. We see her do this, so what we might interpret as the right thing. She tries to save the Rat King because she heard a sound that sounded like someone was in trouble behind the door, so she broke the rules to potentially help someone who would have died without her, and that turns out to be the truth. Now that also turns out, that resulted in the deaths of billions. But her, she acted out of ignorance and out of goodness and kindness and compassion. So she's a regular person, but ends up through fortune and fate or whatever, just happenstance or happen chance. Whatever the word is. She just kind of almost like that character, that good luck charm character who trips and doesn't get shot. Halo kind of trips and falls into an adventure. So she's kind of like I don't know if this is really irony, but like an everyman.
Yeah.
She's like the every woman.
Yeah.
Character that we can all kind of see ourselves in, but somehow she ends up in these fantastical adventures.
Yeah, I think she kind of signs up for the adventures to try to get further out. I think in each case, I think she does choose to get on Clabrani. She does choose to join the army. She's
not without agency.
Yeah,
but she is without.
But then it turns into what she didn't expect. Like she doesn't get further.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
the universe is against her.
Yeah, in a way. Yeah. She never gets what she's looking for. Doesn't really even know what she's looking for, but she certainly, in a way, does get what she's looking for because there's always adventure and excitement.
Yeah.
At least in these sports. Yeah. What a great thing it would be to have 6 more books, but certainly will not be with the same artist any longer.
Yeah, no, and Alan Moore would never go back to it anyway. It would have to be fan fiction world of some sort. So amazing. I think that also the 3 books are really different in tone, despite the up and down. You immediately know you're in for something different with each one. I have to assume absolutely. Like there's the shopping one, then there's the hostess on the ship one, then there's the war one, and you have to assume that the other volumes would have kind of followed the same course, and each would have been a specific theme, I guess.
Wasn't there? Did they in some interview or maybe in the foreword or something? Maybe there was that interview at the end of that volume that you've got that had with the interview with Ian Gibson. Was he talking about some of the potential big picture like bullet point items of additional maybe I'm misremembering that or something, but yeah, I mean at this point I guess beyond that we can only kind of imagine what sort of does she become queen of some desert planet in the Outer Rim, or all the sort of tropes that we could imagine.
That Conan the Barbarian life arc.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Any final thoughts? Really amazing. I mean, I love rereading it. By the way, there is an audiobook version of this, which is to me is just bizarre.
Audio.
Yeah.
Okay, that is bizarre. Yeah.
In audiobooks of comics to me are the strangest thing. I don't know why they do them, but they do. There's even an EC Comics one. I'm like, why? What are we coming to EC Comics for?
Are they aimed at a visually impaired audience? Is it kind of like that?
No, it's like an audio drama. It's like a radio drama.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's an adaptation more than just a
that's right.
audio.
No, that's right. Yes, it's like a radio adaptation or a dramatic adaptation. I did listen to it. I found it hard to follow a lot of the time. I was like, wait, what's this guy talking about? And they put in little sound effects, doors opening and stuff. You're still not sure what's going on.
Well, and I think to compare that to this comic, this is not the hardest read that Alan Moore has given us.
No.
But it's also not a walk in the park. Like a little peek behind the curtain. You contacted me quite recently to do a recording of this. I happened to be busy at work and Because I think you originally wanted to record.
Yeah, a few days ago.
The 23rd.
Or even earlier, yeah.
Friday. But I think your original email was like a week before even.
Yeah.
And I totally get that, because we had just recently learned that Ian Gibson had passed. And obviously nice to get this out in a topical manner, not to sound cold, but anyway. But yeah, it certainly is a book that demands something from the reader in terms of attention and also just being willing to go along for the ride.
Yes.
But pay attention.
Yes. Yeah, and if you're the kind of person that's bored by the shopping stuff, you really need to stick with it to about the halfway point. Before you're really into plot building kind of stuff. Yeah. All right, very cool.
Good stuff.
The Ballad of Halo Jones, full-color omnibus edition, is published by 2000 AD. Kumar is the co-host of the podcast Comic Book Movie Oblivion, about relatively obscure movies based on comics. If you're enjoying our comics discussion every week, consider supporting this podcast by joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/deconcomics. And go to deconstructingcomics.com to connect to us on what used to be Twitter, on Facebook, where we have both a page and a group, or on YouTube. Via our site, you can also shop on Amazon to support the show and find links to subscribe to the podcast. You can comment on any episode there, or drop us a line at mail@deconstructingcomics.com. That's also the address for submitting your own comics work for possible inclusion on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. In the show notes, you'll find a link to our listener survey. Help us out by following the link and giving your opinions of this podcast. Next week, Emmett and I are back with Jack Kirby's conclusion to the Mad Bomb storyline in Captain America and the Falcon, issues 198 to 200. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.